Hello once again, everyone. So today we have a special request from Mr. Wing Chun in application. He requested on our So What Rapier vid if we could go over expulsions and the breaking of the point when it comes to Rapier. Now, in regards to what you want to get out of these, expulsions is absolutely something you will do with Rapier. No question of it. We're also going to show it with the Sabers. Expulsions kind of exist in every single sword thing. Now, you'll see it sometimes given more, how do I say this, emphasis as its own entity, versus sometimes it'll be just kind of part of how you throw the strike. So, for example, usually within longsword, you're going to find that the expulsion is, I refer to it as shearing. It's when those blades are going through and it is expulsing them is part of its Absetzen, which is kind of its own thing. But in regards to just using it as a tool by itself, what you want to do is come up like you're going to find the sword. And you want to come up relatively close to the tip. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to push against his weapon, but instead I'm going to shear, here's that word again, down across the blade, kind of toward his elbow, almost like I'm throwing a cut, which just transfers the force down into his hand. His tip goes off the line because I'm creating a wedge, and when I add in that flick, it knocks him to the side, essentially. So again, I am not going out. That's the big mistake. If I go pure out, he can very easily move from it. But if instead I go almost toward him, I get that nice shink sort of sound, and that's kind of what you're looking for. Now, how do you apply this? Well, again, you come up, you find the sword, and then you just immediately carry off of it. And you'll find that it actually blends very, very well together because following that expulsion, my tip is going to raise because I just flick down into his hand. And naturally, since he falls away from me, I find my arm kind of goes back to center target. So, times to use this and when you should. I like to use it against people who hold a very centralized guard, and this is true of everything. Yeah, the Bolognese in the room's up here, right? But very centralized guard, and in particular, people who leave their tip a little too high. Now, normally if the tip is high, of course I can just attack straight into it and be relatively safe, but he may be very good at warding me off laterally. So instead, what I do is I go toward his tip, and now I get that effect of shearing down his blade, which throws his hand off in a way he's not really used to feeling. And that can, of course, still prompt him to attempt to parry, but the way he'll now parry is he's still going to do that lateral movement, but it's much easier for me to get around since he's trying to pull his tip back, etc. All very, very useful. But that's going to be a simple expulsion into a thrust, and you can do it on both sides. The only difference on this side is that it's going to be a little weaker. It's going to feel a little weirder. Yeah, see in case, right? There we go. And it won't quite pop as well. Now, that is very important to know in case you are dealing with a left-handed person, is that they will be able to expulse with their dominant side on your non-dominant side. And that is generally a very bad day, as that tends to cause you to end up defending with your guard, and anyone who can tell you when it comes to thrust stuff, it's far too easy to go under or over. You do not want to get stuck defending with your guard. So that's an expulsion. And we will be showing that again with the Sabers in a moment. But now let's go back and talk about breaking of the point. Now, while the expulsion exists definitely within Rapier, the breaking of the point comes to us from Fiore, and those of you that have seen the Going Posta series will remember, against an incoming thrust, what we're basically doing is we're putting our sword on top as we move laterally and forcing the point to the ground. This is creating what is known as an overbind. This, again, exists in many, many different systems. It's just a good universal way of shutting down an incoming thrust. It's not the ideal way of shutting down an incoming thrust. The ideal way would be to counter thrust him, which is what we see a lot more with this. But there are always going to be times where you have to dedicate yourself to pure defense. Now, like I said, it doesn't necessarily exist in its pure form in Rapier. However, that's not to say you won't use it. So, if we were to go one for one, what that would mean is I'm in some sort of position where I've created myself and I've been left open. Maybe, for example, I just got expulsed myself and my blade is down, right? If that thrust comes in, I move to the side, directing my tip over to create this angle and get his blade down. Now, what could I do from here? I can still follow up with all of Fiore's advice, maybe not stepping on that thing, though it probably would break if I did, right? But from there, I can, of course, return with the up-down. It's going to be a little less powerful, What I would recommend instead is once you've got this, due to our distance, you're probably better off returning with either reverso or mandrito as you continue to move out. You could try and fall through with a thrust, but anytime you try and work within this distance, you're running risk. So I would go ahead and just keep the juice of what you got and keep going. So we'll go through that hypothetical again. So I just got Expulsions open, he comes in at me, down, done. Pretty simple. You'll even sometimes see that happen just normally in messer, side sword, anything, wherein someone just ends up over parrying against a thrust, because that's a very safe way to parry against it. Now, like I said, that in and of itself doesn't necessarily exist, and the reason why is because with these, I am creating a relatively big opening. Yes, I have imposed myself over him, but my tip has to be offline to do this shape. His tip may still be offline, but he now has a great opportunity to come forward and fill that gap. With long swords or what have you, that threat isn't there as much, so we'll reset, because one, both hands are on it, usually. Even if you did a one-handed thrust, it's still, usually I'm gonna have my hand hovering here. That can very easily put a lot of juice into that threat. With this, I can still do it, but it's just not as good anymore, right? He can stifle that quite easily. So that's kind of why it doesn't work as well. Not to mention, given that we're lunging at each other with these, the range is a little bit different. So Jake and Ivan's just standing relatively close. We'll take like one step over. Proper range for he and I engaging is more like here. Okay, so he expulses me. Okay, we're about here-ish, right? At this point now, I'm not going to get a ton of offline movement. I'm maybe going to get to about here. I have a lot more distance to cover to get my tip online. I'm better off throwing something along those lines. He, however, is loaded on that front foot and just ready to come forward, right? He can stifle that pretty easily, and that's a bad time for me. So like I said, for these reasons, it's not the most ideal in its purest form. But do we ever break the point? Yes. There are two situations. One is going to be just using my hilt to parry, in which case I'm kind of breaking the point, not perfectly, but I am directing something low to deal with an incoming thrust. So this will usually happen wherein I have thrust at Jake already and missed for whatever reason. Maybe he parried, maybe I just suck. He goes for a thrust on my low line. Oh yeah, I fucked up there. No, you're fine. He goes for a thrust on my low line. You will see this, right? And you can tell by the fact that I mucked up, which he didn't do anything wrong. It's not something you practice. It's something you do and you count your lucky stars afterwards. But this is not that different from this. I still have to move offline. I am still creating this overbind. And from here, the same situation still presents itself. It is not ideal for me to try and get my point too much time. I'm better off throwing a reverso or mandrito and leaving. He also still has that opportunity to come in with the grapple because I had to dedicate energy downward and move laterally, which gives him a better shot. The other situation in which breaking the point kinda, and we're tinfoil hats on here, is going to be the Flankanado. Now the Flankanado is a very fun one. It's really more akin to like a mutirin or a transport, but kinda can be done like breaking the point. So what happens here is that we're both against each other, and this can be either just initial, but is better done if he is doing a thrust at me. I'm going to create an overbind by going across. From there, I may very easily execute my hit. You're going to see this a lot in small sword, where it gets its name Flankanado, but this in particular is kind of like breaking the point. You're not supposed to move laterally when you do it because you're looking at whirling him to the outside. But in regards to if we just break down breaking the point to its purest aspects, create overbind, and then take shot you have, this is not dissimilar. So, once again, he starts his thrust, overbind to create that opportunity, then fall through. And if he does parry, I'm much better set up now. So kind of same concept. Now, can you Flankanado to the other side? Yes, but you don't really want to, right? I mean, if he tries that, I can still create it and end up hitting him in a low quarta, but it's not as strong because I have to whirl the tip around in a certain way. I'm really better off from this just going ahead and keeping that momentum going or things along those lines. But similar, so I thought I would include it. Now what Jake and I are going to do is we're going to grab the sabers, and I'm going to just show those motions again. We'll just grab the pair right there. Now, Same exact thing. I will first show an expulsion, and then I will show a thrust and a cut. So it's best off if you're in the inside guard. Like I said, that's where it's going to set up best, but no problem. You can also do this as a cut, and this is very similar to the glazade from Angelo's system of backsword, in which case I turn that immediately into either a 2 or a 6 cut. I'll show that again. Very nice, very fun. Now, in regards to breaking the point, I'm open, he comes in with thrust, down. That one's a little bit better because now since we're closer range with closer range weapons, it's very easy for me to follow through with it. That in particular could even come in from, maybe he's trying to grab my arm or has expulsed my blade out of the way. Here comes that thrust. Oh shit. Things happen. But here's the Flankanado done now with the sabers. He comes in, out to the side, lots of opportunities there. And you'll see that guy a decent amount. Otherwise, thank you very much. So, after the special request, thank you, by the way, for putting that in. I am more than happy to answer requests. It really does put the sugar in my tea, so to speak. Gives me a lot of things to think about and then film. But hopefully that answers your question, Wing Chun in application. So thank you once again. Thank you very much, Jake, for letting me beat up on you as always. And thank you very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.